The landlord and rental licensing program in Denver was such a failure that only about 10% of all rental properties in the city are actually registered. Now, the city is going after all the properties that aren't registered. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the whole rental licensing program that they had up in Denver, Colorado. So they created this program. They were like, oh, you know what? We're going to make sure that all of the rentals are licensed and inspected, and, it's going to work out perfectly. The thing is, the landlords, they didn't comply. Okay, they were like, you know what, screw that. We're not going to even participate in your program. So only about 10% of the rentals in the entire city have actually registered and become licensed, right? And, it looks bad for the politicians up there. So, because it looks so bad, they decided to start going after some of the landlords who haven't registered yet, and hopefully, get compliance out of the other ones when they start hitting these landlords hard, right? I never suggest that a landlord break the law. I always say, hey, comply with the laws in the jurisdiction where you're operating. Okay, so if your state, if your state or your city says, hey, you need to license and register your rentals, right? Then you should be doing so. But I will say this. A lot of small landlords in particular don't know every single law and rule change that comes about all the time, So in a lot of these cities, they're passing so many new anti-landlord laws and rules and regulations so often that, hey, we can't keep up. We can't keep up. And it's not our fault that we didn't register because we didn't even know we had to register in many cases. So yeah, it's a bad situation. I'm not saying that, you should break the law or anything, right? But goodness, man, you know what? I don't think that this sort of thing is going to actually be helpful for stopping the so-called bad actors out there, the less than 1% of landlords who aren't doing things up to snuff, okay? I think that what it will do, though, is punish all the good landlords who take care of their properties, who listen to their tenants, who treat their tenants with respect, right? They're going to punish those landlords by making them jump through all these hoops and pay all this extra money in order to rent their properties. And the only result, of course, and I've always said this, the result will be that rents will increase, that screening criteria will increase, and hopefully, they will learn their lesson from this sort of thing, okay? So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think, okay? If keep in mind, right? Most cities now, most larger cities at least, already have some sort of landlord registration or inspection type program, right? So, we have it here, even in Omaha, Nebraska, okay? But the question I have for you is, do you actually participate in the program? And if you don't, are there any consequences? And that's the real question right there, because if there's no actual consequences for not participating, then the only thing that cities are doing is punishing those who do participate, all right? So anyway, let's get into this article and see what it says. This article is coming from westword.com, and it says, Denver takes enforcement action against 145 properties for failing to get rental licenses. Yeah, there's tens of thousands of properties that don't have licenses right now, but they're targeting these 145 for a specific reason that they're going to mention in the article. So let's get into it. The city of Denver's residential licensing program is getting serious about scofflaws. The Department of Excise and Licenses just announced its first enforcement efforts for multi-unit residential properties that have not yet gotten their required licenses. The department sent 145 violation notices to owners of properties operating without a license as of February 22nd, and plans to issue additional notices as enforcement continues. The notices informed owners that if they don't comply or don't apply for a residential rental license within 45 days, they will be cited by the city and fined $150. we don't want to issue anyone citations and fines. So this is basically one last warning and a notification that they have been identified by the city as in violation of city law, says Eric Escudero, Director of Communications for Excise and Licenses. So yeah, the first fine will be $150. I'm sure that the fines will escalate if they continue to ignore it. But to a lot of these landlords, right, because in order to get a license, you have to pass an inspection. It might cost them less to just pay this fine than it would be to get the inspection and then fix, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of repairs. So, I don't know exactly how the law, would address such an issue. Among the 145 properties that receive violation notices is the Cedar Run Apartments, where tenants have joined together to protest conditions, and the Grand, which is being sued by some tenants it kicked out in July of 2022. Mint Urban Infinity, the subject of a class action lawsuit by past and current tenants over poor conditions and management, is also on the list. The city estimates that about 25,000 multi-unit rental properties in Denver should have gotten licenses by January 1st under a program approved by Denver City Council close to 2 years ago that's designed to record and register all rentals. Only 2,822 of the multi-unit properties managed to meet the deadline, according to excise and licenses. So 22 out of 25,000, that's a little over 10%, but still, that's miserably low number. So here's the question, right? Are they going to go after, a large number of these guys, or are they just going to say, hey, you know what, we're targeting a few in order to get compliance out of the rest, and that's what I'm thinking is what they're trying to do, right? They're just like, okay, we're going to go after these 145, and then maybe that will motivate the other, 20-some thousand to comply. I don't know if it'll work, but we'll see. There was a steady increase in license applications toward the end of 2022, she adds. And the department now has more resources to push the program. It recently hired a team to identify addresses with multi-unit rentals that are not licensed. The city considers citations and fines a last resort because the goal is compliance, not punishment. The recent wave of enforcement efforts primarily targets properties that are the focus of current or previous complaints filed with the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. The Denver Department of Public Health and Environment receives about 1,200 complaints per year, so we'll start with those, and we'll identify if they're still operating, and if they're not licensed, we'll issue notices of violations. But we also will continue through this wave to start identifying other properties that we know are unlicensed as well. To get a license, properties must pass an inspection showing that they meet the city's minimum housing standards, including having working heat, running water, fire safety measures, proper electrical wiring, and sufficient egress. The license is a requirement of the Healthy Residential Rentals for All ordinance passed by Denver City Council in May of 2021 as an attempt to level the playing field between renters and landlords. See, yeah, they're always trying, we're going to level the playing field. Why do they think that landlords have all the landlords are bad? That's what every time they pass any legislation, they always put it through the perspective that all landlords are bad and all of them are trying to cheat tenants, right? Now, you have a very small number of bad players, right? They even mentioned it here that they receive 1,200 complaints per year, right? So 1,200 complaints, not all of them are actually, they're not proven to be an actual problem, right? Or they're complaints where the problem is fixed. So 1,200 complaints, but they have 25,000 multi-unit properties, according to this article, right? So what is that? That's like, less than 5% of all the rental properties have had a complaint. And even then, out of that 1,200, how many are actually, just actual problems that either weren't corrected or were just, complete garbage? Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that the number of bad landlords out there is minuscule. It's tiny, okay? It's absolutely tiny. The good landlords out there are the ones who are left trying to operate their business with all of these new restrictions, all of these new rules, all of these new regulations, and we're the ones who get hammered. And that's what I absolutely hate.